organizer for the Committee of Progressive Pakistani Canadians. Omar visited China very recently in June, and he was in China, in Beijing, I believe, and then Omar was in Kashgar and Urumqi in the area called Xinjiang, which has been in the news a lot. And Omar, I insisted, and I'm sure I was the reason that you took all those photos, so then now he has formed this wonderful presentation for us, and I'm really looking forward to it, and I know you are too, so please welcome Omar.
All of you, I'm sure, are very knowledgeable, so you'll forgive me. I'm not an expert on China or on Xinjiang. How did I happen to go to Xinjiang? I had gone to China for about 6 or 7 weeks, 5-6 years ago, and I didn't have any intention of visiting again. But then for many, many years, I had wanted to go to North Korea. And in the present circumstances, you can go to North Korea only either through China or through Vladivostok in Russia. So this was more convenient. So I was in Beijing, and then before I went to North Korea, I went to Xinjiang for 2 weeks. Before we start, Kashmir. So it's a very important, very burning issue. We had prepared a statement. We brought photocopies here. I can't see them. They are there. And we will be hosting a public meeting. Some of you know Hamid Shani. He is a Kashmiri born and bred from the Pakistani administered Kashmir. And he writes a lot. He's an author. He's a TV commentator. So we hope that you would like that presentation. Aparna Sundar. She's from India, and she's a community activist, and she's done a lot of solidarity work with Kashmir in recent days. Isko aage karna hai? CPPC, our principles are secularism. We stand for equality of men and women, equality of all regardless of color, religion, nationality, ethnicity. We are against militarism, against imperialism, and for 35, 40 years that we've been in existence, we've been against terrorism and fundamentalism. We stand for peace, and we stand for real democracy, social justice, and socialism. Isko aage karo, please. A bit of the context, as Kiran was saying, there is so much about China in the Western media, in the mass media. You might be surprised that China is the single most mentioned topic as a foreign issue for Western media. The single most. Every day you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 articles, and they are almost always either about Xinjiang, or they were now in the past 2 or 3 weeks about Hong Kong. The Western governments and China, before 49, all of you know, the Western governments had a colonial presence in China. They had areas of interest, they had areas of control. You know all about the Opium War, where Britain forced China and the Chinese government to purchase opium. When they resisted, there was a war, and in that war, they even took Hong Kong away. The United States was there, Germany, France, everybody was there, but the most important ones were the Japanese. The Japanese went into Japan in 1933 first, and then from 39 they started to sweep across China and committed terrible, terrible atrocities. When the Chinese fought back, they fought back under two main organizations. One was the Communist Party, which was led by Mao Zedong, and the other one was the nationalist under Chiang Kai-shek. The Americans did help the Chinese in fighting the Japanese. They gave them arms, they gave them support, but you can all guess which side they would have armed the Chiang Kai-shek. People who, when they lost in 1949 to Mao's forces, then they went to Taiwan, and Taiwan is a completely different story. That painting, 1949, October the 1st, that was the second October that the last century saw. The first October was 1917, the Russian Revolution. This was October the 1st, 1949, when Mao stood at Tiananmen Square and made his iconic speech. The Chinese people have stood up, that they would not be bullied by Americans, by foreigners, and they would not be bullied by their own landlords, and they would now have their own destiny in their own hands. From 1949 to 72, American hatred, Western hatred, all of us who are old enough know how vitriolic it was. Every day there was articles, there were speeches about the yellow peril, very racist, and the Chinese were, devouring children, they were killing people left, right, and center, they were doing all sorts of atrocities, and that was, again, it had little impact on China, but what does this propaganda do? It affects people here, that people then start thinking that maybe there is something going on. In 1972, in 1965, China's foreign policy, which was very, very anti-American, started to change. It did change, and it became very anti-Soviet. And they started to make friends with the American government, and in 1972, the American Secretary of State, on a very secret, highly secret mission, he went to Pakistan. From Pakistan, he took a military plane, he went to Beijing, he had preliminary discussions with Mao and the leadership, and then they agreed that Nixon would go there, and America and China would have a diplomatic relationship with each other. Before that, America said that the representatives of China were the people in Formosa. From 1972, the cooperation between the Chinese and the Americans grew and grew and grew. And in the West, the thesis was that China would become democratic. The word democratic is a code word. What they were meaning was that China would become capitalist. Well, that would happen, and we'll just go to that in a second. So it was mainly from 1972 to 2015 or so. It was a relatively calm period between America and China. Western criticism of China was very low-key. The only exception was 1989, when there was protests in Tiananmen Square, and the Chinese government used force to crush it. The Western world went crazy with anger, because 1989, if you will remember, was the years when the Soviet Union was crumbling, when East Germany and other Eastern European governments were crumbling, and there was great hope in Western countries that China would go the same way. When China didn't go the same way, that period was very, very critical for China, and also very high criticism from the West to China. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, there was Obama, what he called the pivot to the East. And the pivot to the East was that previously their attention was focused on Russia. Now their main enemy was going to become China. The American ruling class, they always need an enemy. Soviet Union, radical Islam, Cuba, Venezuela, North Korea, Iran, whatever. but they need also a main enemy. And the main enemy up till now was Russia, but from Russia it has changed to China. Two reasons. American corporations had thought that they could outcompete Chinese corporations. That simply didn't happen. And we can all see that in technology, in the phenomenal economic growth that China has suffered, has experienced, and the military might that China has gained. But there was something else very, very important that happened, that China also started to stand up and started to look the United States. That was the 12th Congress of the Communist Party of China. It's a key changing moment. It is here, or shortly thereafter, well, Xi Jinping became the General Secretary, and very shortly after that, I think 2014, he made the speech, which the Chinese did not used to make before. He said, socialism will eventually defeat capitalism. Holy cow. I mean, the West said, what the hell's going on? You guys were going to become capitalists and whatnot. And they said, no. 2018, this was the celebration of Marx's 200th birth anniversary. And the Chinese didn't used to do these sorts of things. This is the entire Politburo. And behind, of course, you can see Marx, 1818 to 2018. And the speech that she made here also was that we are going to follow socialism, we are going to make the Communist Party honest and strong, and we are not going to backtrack. From this year on, from 2018, 2019, they said that China will have to engage on another long march to be able to fend off imperialism and capitalism. Next. So that's the context of the Western media. China destroys mosques and Uyghur culture. The world knows what is happening to the Uyghurs. Why is it being slow to act? That is from the Guardian newspaper. The Guardian generally is a very good, progressive newspaper. But at times, because they're quite anti-communist also editorially, they have started to say that same line. This was just 2-3 weeks ago. Beijing says all Arabic symbols, language has to be taken down. Muslim women sterilized in Chinese detention camps. And the land drenched in tears, Xinjiang. On and on and on it goes. So, when I went to, as I was saying that before going to North Korea, from Beijing, I went to Xinjiang. I've told you, I am no expert. I could only see what I could see. There was no sort of party delegation to take me around. I went on my own expenses. I had requested that somebody help me with the translation, but no, nobody did. And in Xinjiang, language was more of a problem for me, English, than in Beijing or Shanghai. So please, as I said, take everything that I say with a grain of salt, but nevertheless, this is what I saw, what I think. As I was saying, even Zafar now was mentioning that the West is concerned about Muslims, not Muslims here, not Muslims in the United States, or in Iraq, or Libya, or Yemen, or Syria, or Palestine. Do you guys know what this is? MOAB, Mother of all bombs. It is as long as this. It is yay high. It's 22,000, 24,000 pounds. The Americans tested it in Afghanistan. It's a war crime to use a weapon like this for no reason whatsoever. But so, They do what they have to do with Muslims, wherever in the world, but they are very, very concerned about Muslims in Xinjiang. That was my first question. Why? Why would they be doing so? So then I went and had a look. China, to situate Xinjiang. Imagine, if you will, China, a very, very large country. Imagine it's like a plateau. And the plateau is slightly tilted towards the east. So all the rivers, they flow from the west or the north to the south. It is a mountainous country, 1.4 billion people. 90%, 1.2 billion people are on the eastern seaboard, starting from the north, going all the way along, and then somewhere to the center. The northwest is the Gobi Desert, and the other desert, Xinjiang, as you can see. This was the province, the Muslim province. It is very large, and it is very barren, excepting Kashgar there and Urumqi there. This would be Tibet. The next one. This is the Silk Route in the 8th century. There was not one Silk Route, but there were two main connecting from the west, the one that went up north to the north of the Caspian Sea, between the Aral Sea, then down and east to China, and then the other one coming from Iran, from Tehran, and then Bukhara, and then going up. You will notice that both of them go and meet up in China near Kashgar.